All right, chapter 15 of Genesis. Thank you back. I hope you're enjoying the videos. We're going to get right into this one. A couple of really cool things to talk about here. So this chapter, Abram desires offspring. The Lord promises him seed in number as the stars. Abram believes the promise. His seed will be strangers in Egypt. Then after 4 generations, they will inherit Canaan. So a lot of forth-seeing prophecy for Abraham and his posterity in this one as well. Now, verse 1, after these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. So this is the word of the Lord coming to him. So he's having a vision. Sorry, I have something in my throat. I try to clear it out. So this is something that's really interesting when we talk about this, because if you remember from chapter 14, there was some major wars that happened in the area. Abraham had his area, Lot had his area, but then a lot of wars from a lot of the cities in the area happened, and Abraham had to actually gather up his people and go down and get Lot out and save the people basically there. So there's a story, I believe this comes from the Collected Works of Humility, One Eternal Round, really good book, known as the Field of Abraham. So it gives us a little bit of insight into what we learned in the last video in chapter 14 that will continue on into this chapter as well. Here is an edict of the Emperor Theodosius, who was faced with an environmental problem. The Field of Abraham was a sacred place, yet it was also the site of the greatest year rite in the world, which meant to him the abomination of pagans. This is his edict describing the situation. So there's a place in the ancient world known as the Field of Abraham. That's what they're talking about here. Chapter 4, an account about those things which were done by Constantine the Great concerning the oak of Mamre and about the church which he built there. I have long considered the necessity of a report on the business of the Emperor Constantine concerning the oak which is called Mamre. So this is the Emperor Theodosius, if I've said that right, that is talking here. He says, the place today is called Terebinth. It is about 15 stades south of Hebron and about 240 stades from Jerusalem. So stades, of course, a unit of measurement. In this place, the Son of God, along with the 2 angels sent against Sodom, appeared to Abraham and prophesied that a son would be born to him according to the true report. So this is the field where this Genesis 15 is happening. So this is an independent report talking about what the book of Genesis is telling us, basically. Now, there down to the present day, the brilliant yearly panegyris is celebrated in the summer by the people living in the region, which includes principally Palestinians, Phoenicians, and Arabs. Most of them come for trade, buying and selling, for it is the most popular of fairs, literally from the Latin, of all fairs in the world, the greatest number attend this one. The Jews attend it because they boast Abraham as their ancestor. The Greeks because of the visitation of the angels, the Christians because at that place was the manifestation of that blessed man that clearly indicated the salvation of the human race in times to come. The individuals also revere the place with various cultic practices, some pouring out prayers to God, the ruler of all, others invoking the angels with libations of wine and burning of incense, or the sacrifice of a bullock or a goat, or an egg or a cock, for each one is accustomed to offer the most precious thing he possesses in that year, nourishing it throughout the year to make it fit for sacrifice at the feast for himself and those with him. For everyone, whether, for the veneration of the place or in fear of divine judgment, lest something terrible happen, abstains from sexual intercourse, even though the festival is attended by women who make themselves as beautiful as possible and parade themselves in public, and they have tents or booths where they engage in general intercourse. The place is all open fields and plowed lands without any buildings except around the oak where Abraham dwelt, by which is a well. At other times no merchant drinks water from that well, for according to Gentile custom, lamps are lit at the well. Some pour wine into it, others throw cakes in, others coins or ointment or fumigation, smelling stuff. When the brother-in-law of Constantine, who had been there as a worshiper, reported it to the emperor, he roundly rebuked the bishop of Palestine for neglecting his duty and permitting that most sacred place to be polluted by impure sacrifice and libations. This is testified in the letter which he wrote to Macarius, the bishop of Jerusalem, and to Eusebius, bishop of Pamphylios, and to the other bishops of Palestine, whom he commanded forthwith to meet with the Phoenician bishops to overthrow, destroy, and purge the altar that stood there, burning the statues, and arrange for a church to be built for meeting at this most ancient and holy place. They were to take care of that thereafter. That place should be free of all libations and sacrifices, so that no other religion could stand next to the church of God. All this on pain of the most severe punishment he could inflict. Along with the imperial letter, he ordered leaders and priests of Christ to carry out the work. This, in our opinion, can only be the much disputed Field of Abraham, mentioned 1400 years earlier in the great Karnak inscription of Sheshonq. Excuse me, it was occupied by his army on their way to Jerusalem during his expedition in Palestine. The baffling question was why it should be called the field. This is clear from the use of the same term in various languages to designate the site of a major ceremonial center as the scene of contests and games. Thus we have the Maidan of the Persians and Arabs, the field of honor, or the field in the cloth of gold in Europe. So that's pretty interesting that what Genesis 15 is about to tell us is actually seen as a sacred site, even well into the 4th centuries and beyond, and has been utilized there. So let's talk a bit more about this relief in Karnak, which is Egypt. He had this to say. He says, in his great relief on the wall at Karnak, Sheshonq I treats us to the only appearance of the whole corpus of Egyptian writing of the name of Abraham. In 1904, James H. Breasted commented on lines 71 and 72 of this inscription, which can be nothing else than the Field of Abram. We already have the name of Jacob on the list of Tutmosis III, and probably also that of Joseph. So there is writings in Egypt that talk about this field. There are writings in Greek and other ancient cultures that talk about the legends of this field and the sacredness of how people utilized it. So let's get back into chapter 15 to learn more about why this is so sacred, what happened here, basically. Verse 2, and Abram said, Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless? And the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus. In fact, Eliezer and Damascus both are in the Bible dictionary. You can look those up also. Verse 3, and Abram said, Behold, to me thou hast given no seed, and lo, one born in my house is mine heir. So really he's saying, I have a servant, that's Eliezer, but I don't have posterity to continue on. And you realize he's already had those great blessings of, you will have posterity, you'll continue on, you'll bless the nations of everybody. And now Abraham's like, but I haven't had a kid yet. When is that going to happen? What's going to go on with this? So verse 4, and behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. So now he's actually saying, you will have a child. Now realize Abraham's probably 75, 80 years old by this time, which to us sounds old. To them, 200 to 300 years was not an uncommon time to live. So 80 years is middle-aged in a way. Verse 5, and he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. Remember, he's mentioned that to him once before. So part of the challenge in understanding some of these ancient writings is realizing that sometimes they'll tell the same story again, but maybe give us a little bit different details or from a different perspective later on. So this could be a time where he's getting the same promises to him as before, This could be another time that Abraham said, well, hey, you said before that I'm going to have all this. When is it going to happen? How's that going to work out? And so he's getting a little bit more information on that from the Lord now. Excuse me. In verse 5, he says, verse 6, and he believed in the Lord and he counted it to him for righteousness. So Abraham's believing what the Lord is telling him and realizes this is a good thing. So verse 7, and he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees to give thee this land to inherit it. So recognizing I'm the same person that you've been dealing with basically your whole life, doing with these things. Verse 8, and he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? So Abraham is asking for some evidence. How do I know that I'm going to inherit this land and this is going to work out? So verse 9, and he said unto him, take thee an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Now remember, in fact, turtle dove too, are both in the Bible dictionary. Verse 10, and he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another, but the birds divided he not. And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. So he laid these animals out, basically, divided them in the midst, set them out there, basically, and then the fowls came down to eat the carcasses. So these are dead animals. The birds he set to the side. He didn't divide them up, basically, but the other ones he opened up, basically, it sounds like, and divided them out. And then when the birds came to eat the meat, he shooed them away. So verse 12, and when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, and horror of great darkness fell upon him. So he's having a really bad experience here in this situation here. So let's look into this. I got a couple quotes to kind of go along with this a little bit. One here, let's see, Abraham in Egypt. He has this to say. He says, the title Testament applied to the writings of an ancient patriarch, prophet, or apostle is frequently interchangeable with that of ascension or assumption. If you remember, we've talked about this a little bit earlier, that the ascension of Abraham is also the book of Abraham as well, the Apocrypha of Abraham. These are ancient books that actually match up with the book of Abraham that we have in the Pro-Great Price. But those words are used very synonymously: ascension, apocalypse, book, those kinds of things. It says all three titles are valid for the basic scenario, the ascension to heaven or cosmic tour of the hero, with his return to earth to reveal the mysteries in an apocalyptic prophetic sermon that concludes with a farewell testament. The hero bids farewell to the earth more than once, Enoch being the classic example. Why must he go to heaven twice? To anticipate. In the Abraham literature, it is quite clear that his first ascension, departing from a sacrificial altar, is to the place of horror of great darkness. That's what we're talking about here. The mounting up amid smoke and flames to heaven was his own sacrificial death, making his return to earth a type and shadow of the resurrection. So that's Hugh Nibley's idea of understanding what's going to happen right here, basically. So we have, again in verse 12, Abraham falls asleep, and an horror of great darkness fell upon him. Okay, so this is what's happening. Verse 13, and he said unto Abraham, okay, and realize he said unto Abraham, so this isn't Abraham talking, this is the Lord talking. Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Saying that your posterity is going to go to a foreign land, and they're going to live there, and they will serve the people at foreign lands and be afflicted for 400 years. So verse 14, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. If you really think about it, this is the prophecy. Abraham's being told of what happens with the children of Israel, the 12 tribes that go to Egypt to live, and they get put into subjection. So after the story of Joseph in Egypt, and the children of Israel they're there for hundreds of years, and then Moses takes them out. So that's what he's being told about, basically, at this point. So verse 15, and thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, and thou shalt be buried in a good old age. So you'll pass away, eventually. 16, but in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Verse 17, and it came to pass that when the sun went down, or sorry, 16a has a note actually in it, talking about this fourth generation, noting in that 4 generations of Levi's descendants are named Levi, Kohath, Amram, and Moses. So that's kind of a cool little analogy or little idea in there. Realize when we talk about 4 generations, so Levi's descendants, Levi, of course, is the first, and then Kohath, and then Amram, and then Moses. So kind of a cool how that ends up working out. All right, verse 17, and it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace, and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. So this is the pieces of the animals that he had laid down. Verse 18, in the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. So Bible Dictionary does have the word Euphrates in it. So in fact, in 18c, the river of Egypt, it actually talks about the Wadi el Arish in northern Sinai, more than maybe the river of Egypt, the Nile, but more over there in the Sinai area. And then verse 19 and 20 and 21 talk about people who are in that area at the time, that this land will be inherited by Abraham's descendants eventually, basically. So a powerful vision that Abraham gets. This land is actually historically turned into an ancient historical site. Admittedly, I have not looked up to see if that is actually still a historical site today, or if it was ruined. I haven't heard much about it. This would probably be Jordan River Valley area. I would think so, up in that area. So it could be, but I'm not sure if we fully know where this area is. But we'll just have to look and see. Maybe that'd be good to look up and put it in the notes in your comments if you have looked this up and what you found on this. So we'll see you in chapter 16.